This 4-year-old beggar girl is kicked off a moving bus for not having bus fare, but a millionaire saw everything, and something shocking happens. Comment what you think will happen. Your opinion is very important, and subscribe to my channel to support my work. Your help is very important. The light winter rain turned the streets of Asheville into dark mirrors, reflecting the yellowish glow of the streetlights that barely penetrated the thick mountain fog. The Route 47 city bus crawled along Biltmore Avenue, lurching heavily with each pothole in the worn asphalt. Among the passengers returning from work that Thursday afternoon, a small figure stood out incongruously. Iris, just 6 years old, sat on the seat closest to the door, clutching a torn plastic shopping bag. Her bare feet barely touched the floor of the vehicle, and her clothes, a faded t-shirt and a skirt that had once been blue, were damp from the drizzle seeping in through the poorly sealed windows. Her brown hair clung to her thin face, framing dark eyes that carried a sadness far too deep for someone so young. In the bag were some stale bread crusts and 2 dented soda cans she had found in the trash at the farmer's market. "End of the line, everybody off," shouted the driver Jerry, a middle-aged man who knew every curve of that route like the back of his hand. Iris remained seated, staring out the fogged window. She knew she didn't have money for the return fare, but she needed to get back to the hollow where she lived with her grandma, Bessie. The rain had intensified, and the walk home would take over an hour on the dirt roads. "Hey, kid," called Evan, the fare collector, a skinny 35-year-old with a permanently irritated expression. "You getting off or what?" "Please, mister," Iris murmured, her voice almost inaudible. "I need to get to Poverty Flats. I don't have any money, but I can help clean the bus tomorrow." Evan let out a harsh laugh. "Clean the bus? You can barely reach the handrail. Stop making excuses and get off." "But it's raining really hard," the girl insisted, pointing to the window. "Grandma will worry if I don't come home." "Not my problem," Evan replied, rising from his seat. "Rules are rules. No pay, no ride. Now get a move on. I gotta close up the register." Iris rose slowly, clutching her bag tightly. Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't cry. She had learned early that crying didn't solve anything, it only made things worse. She walked toward the back door, where other passengers waited impatiently. "Hurry up, kid," Evan shouted, losing his patience. "The bus can't stay here all night." At that moment, as Iris stepped onto the first step of the door, Evan had a surge of anger that would change everything. Instead of waiting for her to get off naturally, he pushed her from behind with unnecessary force. The girl lost her balance and fell off the moving bus, tumbling across the wet asphalt as her bag ripped open, scattering her few belongings across the street. The sound of the small body hitting the ground echoed in the cold night, followed by the rumble of the bus driving away, leaving behind only the low whimpers of an injured child. Iris tried to get up, but a sharp pain in her right knee made her collapse again. Her elbow was scraped and bleeding, mingling with the rainwater washing over the asphalt. A few yards away, stopped at the traffic light in his black Cadillac, Oliver Drummond witnessed the whole scene. The 52-year-old businessman had left the monthly board meeting of his hardware store chain and was heading home when he saw what appeared to be an attack on the most basic human dignity. His fingers tightened on the leather steering wheel as he watched the girl try to gather her scattered belongings from the street. Oliver was a man of medium height, with neatly cut grey hair and blue eyes that reflected both the toughness of business and a melancholy he rarely let show. He wore an impeccable grey suit and a discreet tie, the perfect image of the successful businessman. But at that moment, all his composure crumbled as he saw a child being treated like disposable trash. The light turned green, but Oliver didn't move. Behind him, other cars began to honk, irritated by the delay. He watched Iris finally manage to get up, limping visibly as she walked along the wet sidewalk. The girl seemed to know the way, even in the darkness and under the rain that was now falling more heavily. A mixture of indignation and sadness filled Oliver's chest. In his 52 years of life, he had seen much injustice, but something about that injured child walking alone in the rain touched an old wound in his soul. Maybe it was the memory of his younger brother, whom he had lost in an accident when he was only 8 years old. Maybe it was the emptiness he felt since discovering that he could never have children. Without thinking twice, Oliver started the car again and began to follow Iris at a distance, keeping his headlights low so as not to scare her. The girl continued resolutely, despite the visible pain in every step. She walked up Lexington Avenue, one of the roads leading to the outlying hollows of Asheville, where humble houses clung to the hillsides like wildflowers sprouting among the rocks. With each meter they climbed, the streets became narrower and the asphalt gave way to dirt. Oliver had to stop a few times to avoid losing Iris from sight between the tight curves and the fog descending from the mountains. The neighborhood was a completely different reality from his, where mansions with manicured gardens contrasted sharply with the simple shacks he now saw around him. After nearly 40 minutes of walking, Iris finally stopped in front of a rickety structure made of wood and corrugated metal, situated at the end of a steep path. The house, if it could be called that, was poorly lit by a single bulb hanging from the low ceiling. There was no gate, just a plastic sheet covering the entrance. Oliver parked about 50 yards away, hidden behind an abandoned building. From there, he could see Iris standing in front of the house, taking a deep breath before entering. The girl seemed to be psychologically preparing to face something or someone on the other side of that curtain. "Where have you been?" A rough female voice echoed from inside the house. "It's past 8. I told you to be back before dark." Iris did not respond. Oliver saw her lower her head and silently enter the shack. For a few minutes, only the sound of rain on the corrugated metal roof broke the silence of the night. Then, the voices began again, louder and angrier. "Didn't you bring anything? Spent the whole day on the street and came back empty-handed?" "I brought some, Grandma." Iris's voice was almost inaudible. "There's bread and Dale, bread, dented cans. Is that what you call help?" The sound of something being thrown on the ground echoed through the night, followed by the soft crying of a child. Oliver felt his stomach churn. His hands trembled on the steering wheel as he fought the urge to get out of the car and intervene directly. "Because of you, I lost everything," continued the woman's voice, which Oliver assumed was Iris's grandmother. "Because of you, your parents left. Because of you, I'm stuck in this hole." The silence that followed was even more disturbing than the yelling. Oliver remained in the car for another hour, watching the small light coming from the house flicker in the darkness. Eventually the voices ceased completely, and the house became completely silent. When he finally decided to leave, Oliver carried in his chest a feeling he had not experienced in years, the absolute certainty that his life had changed forever that rainy night. On the way home, a single question echoed in his mind. How could a society allow a 6-year-old child to be treated that way? Upon arriving at his mansion in the upscale neighborhood of Biltmore Forest, Oliver found his wife Carol watching television in the main living room. She barely looked up when he entered, a gesture that had become routine in recent months. The 15-year marriage had cooled considerably since they discovered they could not have children, and now they lived more like roommates than husband and wife. "Late tonight," Carol commented without taking her eyes off the screen. "Meeting ran long," Oliver lied, taking off his wet coat. As he went up to the bedroom, Oliver couldn't get the image of Iris falling off the bus out of his mind. He knew that the next day, when he woke up in his comfortable bed and had coffee served by the maid, that girl would probably wake up on the cold floor of a shack, not knowing if she would have anything to eat. That night, for the first time in years, Oliver Drummond could not sleep, tormented by the certainty that he had witnessed something that would change his perspective on everything. Dawn arrived grey over the mountains of Asheville, bringing with it a persistent drizzle that seemed to never end. Oliver woke up before the alarm, as had been happening for weeks since that fateful night. The images of Iris falling off the bus continued to haunt his thoughts, interfering with his concentration during work meetings and robbing him of his sleep. During breakfast, served promptly at 7 o'clock by the housekeeper Maria, Oliver watched his wife distractedly flipping through a home decor magazine. Carol, at 47, maintained an elegant beauty that had won admirers throughout her life. Always impeccable blonde hair, designer clothes, and a posture that demonstrated her origins in a traditional family from Charlotte. But in recent years, especially after the frustrated attempts to get pregnant, a coldness had settled between them. "You've been acting strange," Carol commented without looking up from the magazine. "Distracted, worried about something at the business?" Oliver took a sip of his coffee and chose his words carefully. "Just operational issues. Nothing much." The truth was, he couldn't stop thinking about Iris. For 3 consecutive nights, he had returned to Poverty Flats, always at the same time, always keeping a safe distance. He watched the routine of that miserable house, trying to understand the dynamic between the girl and her grandmother. What he saw left him increasingly disturbed. Bessie, Iris's grandmother, was a 71-year-old woman who carried the marks of a hard life on her face. Thin and hunched over, with white hair always disheveled, she spent most of her time sitting in the only chair she possessed, shouting orders at her granddaughter. Iris, in turn, performed household chores that were too heavy for her age, fetching water from a community well 200 yards from the house, sweeping the dirt floor, organizing the few belongings they possessed. But what bothered Oliver most was realizing that Iris slept on the floor, on a thin, torn blanket, while Bessie occupied the only bed in the shack. During the cold mountain mornings, he could hear the girl's teeth chattering from the cold through the thin wooden wall. That Friday morning, after Carol left for her weekly appointment at the beauty salon, Oliver made a decision that had been maturing for days. He drove to the supermarket closest to Poverty Flats and made purchases that caught the cashier's attention. Powdered milk, bread, fruit, a colorful children's blanket, and some children's clothes. "Is this for a donation?" asked Maggie, the cashier who served him, curious about the unusual combination of products. "Something like that," replied Oliver, paying in cash to avoid traces on his card. The plan was simple. He would leave the supplies near the shack during the absence of Bessie and Iris, who usually left together on Friday mornings. Bessie took her granddaughter to collect recyclable material in downtown Asheville, an activity that lasted at least 3 hours. Oliver parked in the same position as always and waited. Promptly at 9 o'clock, he saw Bessie and Iris leave the shack. The grandmother walked slowly, leaning on an improvised cane, while Iris carried 2 large bags for the material they would collect. The girl was still limping slightly from the injury to her knee, something that made Oliver's heart clench. As soon as they disappeared down the path, he acted quickly. He carried the shopping bags and left them discreetly next to the door of the shack, protected from the rain by a tarp he found on the site. He left no note or identification, just the supplies he hoped would make a difference in that child's life. The return home was marked by a mixture of satisfaction and anxiety. For the first time in weeks, Oliver felt useful, as if he had done something concrete to improve the situation. But he was also nervous about how Bessie would react to finding the mysterious gifts. His doubts were answered the following afternoon, when he returned to observe from afar. Hidden in his usual position, Oliver saw Bessie meticulously examine each item he had left. The elderly woman held the children's blanket with an expression of suspicion, turning it from side to side as if looking for clues about its origin. "Iris, get over here!" shouted Bessie. The girl appeared quickly, still wearing the same dirty clothes as always. When she saw the supplies scattered on the ground, her eyes widened in surprise and, for a brief moment, something like joy illuminated her thin face. "Did you bring this?" asked Bessie, her voice full of suspicion. "No, Grandma," Iris replied, shaking her head. "When we got back, it was already here." "Someone's been messing around here. Someone's been snooping around our house," said Bessie, looking around with paranoia. This isn't normal. Nobody gives anything for free in this world. Despite the suspicion, Bessie did not completely reject the gifts. Oliver watched with satisfaction when she prepared a glass of milk for Iris, the first time he had seen the girl drink something nutritious. The blanket was also accepted, although Bessie examined it again before allowing Iris to use it. During the following weeks, Oliver established a careful routine. Always on Friday mornings, when the pair left to collect recyclable material, he left supplies and occasionally clothes for Iris. Never anything too expensive or flashy, just enough to ensure that the girl had adequate food and clean clothes. The transformation in Iris was gradual but noticeable. Her cheeks gained a little more color, and she seemed to have more energy during the household chores. Oliver felt increasingly connected to that secret routine, as if he had found a purpose that had been missing in his life. But the situation at home was deteriorating. Carol had noticed his absences and changes in behavior. The questions became more frequent and direct, creating a tension that Oliver didn't know how to resolve. "You've been very distant lately," Carol said during dinner on a Tuesday. "You leave early, come back late, and are distracted when you're here. What's really going on?" "I've already explained, Carol. Problems at the company. The competition is tight. We need to reinvent ourselves." "And that means disappearing on weekends? Because I called Mark yesterday and he said you didn't show up at the office on Saturday as you told me." Oliver felt his blood run cold. Mark was his minority partner and longtime friend. If Carol was checking his information through him, the situation had become seriously complicated. Mark must be confused. "You know how forgetful he is," Oliver tried, but he realized that the explanation sounded weak even to his own ears. "Forgetful?" Carol slammed her fork down hard on the plate. "Oliver, we've been married for 15 years. I know when you're lying. If you're having an affair, I'd rather you tell me now than find out through other means." The accusation of infidelity hit Oliver like a punch to the gut. Ironically, he was being more faithful to the marriage than ever, but his loyalty had shifted to something Carol would never understand. How could he explain that he was in love with the idea of saving an unknown child? How could he tell her that he had found meaning in life through an act of anonymous kindness? "There's no other relationship," he said, his voice full of sincerity. "My word should be enough." "Your word used to be," Carol replied, rising from the table. "But words without transparency are worthless." That night, Oliver stayed up late, torn between two worlds that seemed incompatible. On one side, his marriage and established social life. On the other, a 6-year-old girl who had become the center of his thoughts and actions. In Poverty Flats, Iris was also awake, looking through a crack in the wall at the stars she could see between the clouds. She had developed a theory about the mysterious gifts. She believed that her mother, from some distant place, was sending help through a guardian angel. It was a childish fantasy that consoled her on cold nights and helped her endure Bessie's constant yelling. What neither of them knew was that very soon Bessie's suspicions would turn into action, and Oliver's entire carefully planned operation would be at risk of being discovered. Bessie's paranoia grew with each week. During the month following the first mysterious donations, the elderly woman developed an obsessive routine of checking the surroundings of the shack for signs of intrusion. She walked with difficulty around the property, examining footprints in the mud, looking for broken branches or any evidence that someone was snooping around her house. "Someone's watching us," she constantly muttered to Iris. "Rich folks don't give anything for free. They must be plotting something bad." Iris, in turn, had developed an ambiguous relationship with the gifts. On one hand, they were the difference between going hungry and having something to eat. On the other hand, Bessie's constant comments scared her. The girl began to associate each nutritious meal with the possibility of some imminent danger. On the morning of a rainy Monday, the situation took an unexpected turn. Bessie decided to share her suspicions with Jolene, her closest neighbor, a 45-year-old woman known for spreading information throughout the community with the speed of a wildfire. "Jolene, I need to tell you something," Bessie said, leaning on her improvised cane at the door of the neighboring shack. "Someone's been messing with my things, leaving food and clothes for Iris." Jolene, who was hanging clothes on a rickety clothesline, immediately stopped what she was doing. Her small eyes sparkled with curiosity and a hint of malice. "What do you mean, leaving things?" "Every Friday, when we go out to collect recyclables, someone comes here and leaves supplies. Expensive stuff, you know? Powdered milk, fruit, new clothes for the girl. And you haven't seen who it is?" "Never, but I'm sure it's someone with a lot of money. The stuff is all good brands, new packaging from the supermarket." Jolene dropped the wet clothes back into the basin and approached, lowering her voice conspiratorially. "Bessie, have you thought that it might be something from dangerous people? Those rich folks don't do anything without wanting something in return." "That's what I think too," Bessie agreed, shaking her head vigorously. "But what do they want with Iris?" The question hung in the humid morning air, but both women already had their own dark theories. Jolene, who possessed a fertile imagination fueled by soap operas and sensationalist TV shows, was quick to spread the story throughout the community, adding dramatic details to each new version. By the end of the week, all of Poverty Flats was aware that a rich man was snooping around Bessie's house with dubious intentions. The story took on a life of its own, transforming into rumors about kidnapping, child trafficking, and other conspiracy theories that left all the residents on alert. Oliver, completely unaware of the hurricane his good intentions had unleashed, continued his weekly routine. That Friday, he arrived at the usual spot, carrying more supplies. This time, he had included some children's books he found at a bookstore, thinking that Iris might like to learn to read better. But as he approached the usual hiding place, something was different. There was more activity in the area than usual. Groups of 2 or 3 people were talking in low voices, looking in the direction of Bessie's shack with serious expressions. Some older children were playing closer to the house, as if they were watching. Oliver hesitated. His instinct told him that something had changed, but he couldn't identify exactly what. He decided to wait a little longer before making the delivery, observing the movement to better understand the situation. It was then that he saw Jolene approach a group of older men, gesturing animatedly in the direction of Bessie's shack. Even from a distance, he could catch fragments of the conversation when the wind carried their voices. "Everyone needs to keep an eye out. Child in danger, strange man." Oliver's heart raced. Somehow his secret operation had been discovered, or at least suspected. The community was on alert, and he was the target of suspicion. For a moment he considered abandoning everything and leaving, but the image of Iris starving again made him stay. He decided to adopt a different approach. Instead of leaving the supplies discreetly as he always did, he waited until he saw Bessie and Iris return from their morning expedition. Then, in an impulsive decision that would change everything, he got out of the car and walked directly toward them. "Excuse me," Oliver said, stopping at a respectful distance. "I'd like to talk to you." Bessie turned slowly, leaning on her cane. Her small, distrustful eyes examined Oliver from head to toe, noting the expensive suit, the gold watch, the Italian leather shoes. Iris hid partially behind her grandmother, but her curious eyes remained fixed on the well-dressed stranger. "Who are you?" asked Bessie, her voice full of hostility. "My name is Oliver. I've been helping you in recent weeks, leaving some things here." The silence that followed was tense and prolonged. Bessie processed the information slowly, her suspicions finally confirmed. Iris, in turn, widened her eyes as she discovered the identity of her mysterious benefactor. "You were the one leaving those things?" asked Bessie, her voice rising in tone. "Why? What do you want from us?" Oliver chose his words carefully, aware that both Bessie and some curious neighbors were watching the interaction. I saw your granddaughter in a difficult situation a few weeks ago. I just wanted to help. Nothing more. Difficult situation how? Bessie insisted. She was thrown off a bus for not having fare. I witnessed it and was worried. Bessie looked at Iris, who lowered her head in embarrassment. The girl had never told her about the incident on the bus, fearing her grandmother's reaction. And you thought you could interfere in our life because of that? Bessie's voice was getting louder, attracting even more attention from the neighbors. That wasn't the intention, Oliver replied, realizing that the conversation was taking a dangerous turn. I just wanted to make sure she had adequate food and... Adequate food? Bessie shouted, her voice echoing through the holler. Do you think I don't take good care of my granddaughter? Do you think we're miserable people who need your charity? The situation was deteriorating rapidly. More neighbors approached, forming a semicircle around the discussion. Oliver recognized the growing hostility in the air and understood that he had made a serious mistake in exposing himself that way. That's not what I meant, he tried to explain. But Bessie was already in full attack mode. Rich folks like you only show up here when they want something bad, she continued. You must be some pervert, some criminal. Why else would a man of your condition be interested in a poor child? The accusations hit Oliver like slaps in the face. He looked around and saw only hostile and suspicious faces. Jolene was in the middle of the crowd, clearly pleased to see her conspiracy theories gaining traction. I'm leaving, Oliver said, raising his hands in a gesture of peace. I didn't mean to cause problems. That's right, leave and don't come back, shouted Bessie. And if I see you snooping around here again, I'm calling the police. As Oliver hurried away toward the car, he heard the hostile comments of the residents behind him. Words like pedophile, criminal, and exploiter were murmured with increasing conviction. His attempt to help had turned into a public nightmare. But what disturbed him most was seeing Iris watching everything in silence, her big eyes reflecting confusion and fear. The girl didn't fully understand what was happening, but she knew that the man who had been kind to her was being treated like a villain. When Oliver reached the car, his hands were shaking as he turned the ignition. His entire carefully planned operation had collapsed in a matter of minutes. Worse yet, he was now seen as a threat by the very person he intended to help. As he drove back home, a painful question echoed in his mind. How could he continue to help Iris when his own presence had become a source of terror and distrust? The attempt to do good had turned into yet another source of suffering for the girl he only wanted to protect. That night, in Poverty Flats, Iris slept restlessly, thinking about the well-dressed man who had brought food and kindness into her life, and who was now being treated like a monster. She didn't understand the world of adults, but she sensed that she had lost something important that day. The days following the public confrontation brought consequences that Oliver had not foreseen. The story of the suspicious rich man spread beyond Poverty Flats, reaching the ears of merchants in downtown Asheville through the informal network of gossip that connected all the neighborhoods of the city. That's how Bart, a private investigator hired by Carol, learned about a situation involving his client in a deprived area of the city. Bart was a meticulous 58-year-old man, a former police detective who had found a lucrative way to use his skills in private investigation. When Carol approached him a week earlier, her suspicions about a possible betrayal by her husband seemed routine. But the reports about a businessman in a black Cadillac visiting a local slum added an intriguing dimension to the case. Mrs. Drummond, Bart said during his morning call on Monday, I need to report some interesting developments regarding your husband's behavior. Carol was having coffee on her balcony, watching the manicured garden of her mansion. Did you find anything? Your husband has been regularly visiting a deprived area of the city. Specifically, he's been seen in Poverty Flats, always on Friday mornings. The silence on the other end of the line was prolonged. Carol tried to process this unexpected information. An affair within her own social class would be painful but understandable. But what would Oliver be doing in a slum? Are you sure about this? she finally asked. Absolutely. And there's more. I spoke discreetly with some locals. It seems your husband was involved in some kind of suspicious activity related to a child. Bart's words hit Carol like a lightning bolt. Her mind immediately built terrible scenarios, fueled by television reports about scandals involving wealthy men and vulnerable children. What kind of activity? I'm still investigating the details, but there was a public confrontation between him and the child's family. The residents are suspicious and hostile. That night, when Oliver arrived home, he found Carol waiting in the main living room, sitting rigidly in her favorite armchair. Something in her posture immediately alerted him that serious trouble was coming. "We need to talk," she said, her voice controlled but full of tension. "About what?" Oliver asked, although part of him already suspected the answer. "About your visits to poverty flats." Oliver's world crumbled at that moment. His legs grew weak, and he grabbed the back of the sofa to avoid falling. How had Carol found out? And more importantly, what exactly did she know? "Carol, I can explain." "Explain what?" She rose abruptly, years of frustration and suspicion exploding all at once. "Explain why you've been lying to me for months. Explain why you're involved with a child in a slum. Explain why our entire neighborhood is going to find out that my husband is a—" "No!" Oliver shouted, with a vehemence that surprised them both. "It's not what you're thinking. I would never do that." "Then explain it to me. Tell me exactly what's going on, because the version I received is that you were publicly confronted for doing something inappropriate with a 6-year-old girl." Oliver sat heavily on the sofa, running his hands over his face. How could he explain that he had found meaning in his life through an unknown child? How could he tell her that he felt more like a father to that girl than he ever felt like a husband to his own wife? "I saw an injustice and wanted to help," he began slowly. "A child being mistreated, going hungry, sleeping in the cold. I started leaving food and clothes for her anonymously." "And that evolved into what?" Carol asked, her voice as sharp as a knife. "Into nothing inappropriate. I never touched that child, never was alone with her, never did anything other than try to make sure she had the bare minimum to survive." Carol watched her husband for a long moment, trying to decide if she believed his words. 15 years of marriage gave her some clues about when he was lying, and at this moment he seemed to be telling the truth. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, her voice softening slightly. "Because I knew you wouldn't understand. That you would think exactly what you're thinking now." The conversation was interrupted by the ringing of the phone. Carol answered and immediately recognized the voice of her sister-in-law, Melanie, wife of Oliver's brother. "Carol, honey, I need to tell you something terrible I heard today at the club." Carol's heart froze. If the news had reached the most exclusive country club in Asheville, it meant that her entire social network would soon know about the embarrassing situation. Meanwhile, in poverty flats, life had become even more difficult for Iris. Bessie, fueled by paranoia and the constant comments of the neighbors, had become more strict and distrustful. The girl no longer received the regular supplies that she had become accustomed to finding, and hunger had returned in full force. "Because of you, everyone's watching our house now," Bessie complained that night, as Iris tried to sleep on her thin blanket. "Because of you, that dangerous man showed up here." But he only brought food, Grandma," Iris murmured, trying to defend the gentle stranger who had brought some relief to her difficult life. "Poisoned food! Food to make you stupid and do bad things with you!" Bessie shouted. "You don't understand anything, you dumb girl. Rich men don't help poor children without wanting something in return." Iris shrank into the darkest corner of the shack, confused and scared. She didn't understand why something that seemed so good, food when she was hungry, clean clothes when she was cold, was seen as something terrible by adults. The next morning, the situation worsened when Father Amos, a respected spiritual leader in the Poverty Flats community, appeared at Bessie's door. The priest, a black man of 65 who had dedicated his entire life to caring for the poorest, had heard the worrying rumors about the situation. "Mrs. Bessie," he said with his calm but authoritative voice, "I came to talk about this story of the man who was around here." "Father, I'm so glad you came." Bessie perked up at seeing a figure of authority validating her concerns. "I knew there was something wrong. Man from the city, in an expensive car wanting to give gifts to Iris." Father Amos observed the girl, who was sitting on the floor organizing some pieces of cardboard that she used as toys. Iris seemed even thinner than the last time he had seen her, and her clothes were visibly more worn and dirty. "And where are these gifts now?" the priest asked. "I threw everything away. I don't want anything from that dangerous man in my house." The priest frowned. Something wasn't adding up in the story. If the man had criminal intentions, why would he leave gifts anonymously? Why wouldn't he try to create a direct relationship with the child? "Mrs. Bessie, did you ever talk to this man? Did you find out what he really wanted?" "I did talk to him. He said he saw Iris in a difficult situation and wanted to help. But I know that's an excuse. Rich folks don't care about people like us." "And what was that difficult situation?" the priest insisted, his experience with human nature telling him that there was more to the story. Bessie hesitated, realizing that she would have to admit that she didn't know about an important incident in her granddaughter's life. "Iris didn't tell me right," she murmured finally. Father Amos knelt in front of Iris, who was watching him with her big, scared eyes. "Iris, my dear, did something happen to you any time when you needed help?" The girl looked quickly at Bessie, fearing reprisals, but the priest's reassuring presence encouraged her to speak. "It was on the bus, Father. The busman pushed me because I didn't have money to pay. I fell on the street and got hurt." The revelation hit both Bessie and the priest. The elderly woman had never known the details of what had happened that day, and Father Amos began to understand that perhaps the situation wasn't what it seemed at first glance. "And after that, the gifts started to appear?" the priest asked gently. "Yes," replied Iris, her voice almost inaudible. "Good food, milk, a warm blanket. I thought it was my mom sending it from heaven." The child's innocent words created a heavy silence in the shack. Father Amos began to suspect that perhaps he had misjudged the situation, and that a man genuinely concerned about the well-being of a child had been unfairly demonized by the community. But the damage was already done. Oliver's reputation in the city was ruined, his marriage hung by a thread, and Iris had lost the only source of relief in her life of deprivation. The good intentions had created a hurricane of consequences that no one knew how to control. Oliver's social life collapsed with frightening speed. In 3 days, the story had spread through all the business and social circles of Asheville, gaining increasingly sordid details with each new version. At the club where he played tennis on Saturdays, the conversations ceased when he approached. At the trade association, colleagues who used to greet him effusively now just nodded politely from a distance. "Oliver, we need to talk," said Matt, his minority partner, during a tense meeting on Monday. "The situation is affecting the company. 2 suppliers have already questioned whether they want to maintain contracts with us." Matt Archer was 5 years younger than Oliver, and had been his right-hand man in building the hardware store chain. A pragmatic and direct man, he had never been involved in personal matters of business, but now he found himself forced to address an issue that threatened everything they had built together. "What exactly is being said?" Oliver asked, although he feared the answer. "That you're involved in something inappropriate with a child from a slum. People are speculating about pedophilia, abuse, exploitation. It doesn't matter if it's true or not. The mere association is destroying our reputation." Oliver got up and walked to the window of his office, watching the traffic on the commercial street. 15 years building a respected company, employing 40 people, contributing to the local economy, and it could all disappear because of a misunderstanding. "And what is your suggestion?" he asked without turning around. "Temporary leave of absence. Let me manage the operations until the situation is clarified. Maybe hire a lawyer, make a public statement explaining your version." Matt's suggestion sounded like a stab in the back. Being removed from his own company was a humiliation that Oliver never imagined facing. But looking at the situation pragmatically, he knew it was the wisest decision to protect the jobs of his employees. Meanwhile, in poverty flats, Iris's life had become even more precarious. Bessie's paranoia increased daily, fueled by the constant comments of neighbors who came to check if everything was okay. The elderly woman had developed the conviction that other rich men might appear and kept Iris practically a prisoner in the shack. "You're not going out alone anymore," declared Bessie on a cold Tuesday morning. "There are dangerous people watching you. Until I can go with you, stay in here." Iris, who always had limited freedom but at least could play in the small yard in front of the shack, now found herself confined to the claustrophobic space of a few square feet. The lack of exercise, combined with the poor diet that had returned after the end of the donations, was visibly affecting her health. The situation was further complicated when Bessie began to show symptoms of the flu that quickly evolved into something more serious. The 71-year-old woman, already fragile from decades of hard life, developed a persistent cough that left her breathless. But her distrust of the outside world had become so intense that she refused to seek medical help. "Clinic doctors just want to know about our lives," she muttered between coughing fits. "They're going to ask questions about you. They're going to want to examine you. I don't trust anyone." Iris watched with growing concern her grandmother's condition. At 6 years old, she didn't fully understand the severity of the situation, but she sensed that something was very wrong. During the nights, she heard Bessie cough violently, sometimes accompanied by moans of chest pain. It was during one of those nights that Father Amos made a decision that would change the course of the whole situation. After his conversation with Iris and Bessie, he had spent days reflecting on the case of the mysterious man. His decades of experience working with disadvantaged communities had taught him to distinguish between genuine predators and people with good intentions, misunderstood. Determined to discover the truth, Father Amos sought out Jolene, the most well-informed neighbor about the events. "Jolene, I need you to tell me everything you know about this man who was around here." Jolene, always eager to share information, invited the priest into her simple but organized home. "Father, I saw this man several times, always on the same day of the week, always with the same expensive car. He stayed parked back there, hidden." "And what exactly did you see him doing?" "At first, just watching. Then he started leaving things near Bessie's house. I never saw him try to talk to Iris or call her to the car. He always left the things and left." Father Amos asked more detailed questions, and the pattern that emerged didn't correspond to the behavior of a predator. Predators sought direct contact, tried to establish trust, isolated their victims. This man had maintained a consistent distance and only provided basic necessities. "Jolene, did you write down the car's license plate?" "I did, Father. It's here on the paper." She produced a yellowed piece of paper where she had scribbled the numbers and letters. With that information, Father Amos decided to do his own investigation. He knew Detective Robert Silver since seminary. They were longtime friends who shared a commitment to social justice. A discreet call could clarify the identity and reputation of the mysterious man. "Robert, I need a personal favor," the priest said during his call the next morning. "I have a car license plate, and I need to know who it belongs to. It's a delicate matter involving a child in my community." Detective Robert Silver, an upright 50-year-old man, didn't hesitate to help his friend. "Send me the plate, Father. I'll check discreetly. 2 hours later, Robert returned the call with surprising information. Father, the car belongs to Oliver Drummond, local businessman, owner of the Drummond hardware store chain. I checked his background. Clean record, no criminal record or complaints involving minors. He's known as an upright man in business circles. The revelation left Father Amos deeply disturbed. Apparently, the community had demonized an honest man who had genuinely tried to help a child in need. Worse yet, the consequences of that demonization had harmed not only Oliver, but also Iris, who had lost a vital source of support. That afternoon, while reflecting on how to proceed, Father Amos received an unexpected visit. Donna Rosa, one of the oldest residents of the holler, appeared at his small pastoral house, visibly agitated. "Father, there's something wrong with Bessie," she said without preamble. "I haven't seen her or Iris leave the house for 2 days. And this morning I heard the girl crying very loudly." The alarm immediately went off in the priest's mind. Bessie, despite her eccentricities, always maintained a rigid routine that included leaving at least once a day. 2 days without appearing suggested something serious. "Let's check," Father Amos decided, following Donna Rosa to Bessie's shack. As they approached, they could clearly hear the disturbing sounds coming from inside, a violent and continuous cough interspersed with childlike weeping. Father Amos knocked on the door, but received no coherent response, only more coughing and moaning. "Bessie, it's Father Amos. Can I come in?" "Father," came a weak, hoarse voice. "I'm not well. The girl." Without waiting for more invitations, Father Amos pushed aside the sheet that served as a door and entered the shack. What he found shocked him deeply. Bessie was lying in her bed, visibly feverish and struggling to breathe. Iris was sitting on the floor next to the bed, holding her grandmother's hand and crying silently. "How long has she been like this?" asked the priest, approaching to examine Bessie. 3 days, Iris replied with her small voice. "She can't stop coughing, and she's very hot." The situation was clearly a medical emergency. Bessie presented all the symptoms of severe pneumonia, a potentially fatal condition for a woman of her age and physical condition. But Father Amos knew that convincing her to seek medical help would be difficult, considering her current paranoia. "Bessie, I need to take you to the hospital now," he said firmly. "No, I can't leave Iris. They'll ask questions. They'll want to take her. I'll take care of Iris. But you need urgent medical treatment." It was in that moment of crisis that Father Amos made a decision that would change the whole dynamic of the situation. He looked at Iris, a child clearly in distress, caring alone for a gravely ill grandmother, and understood that perhaps it was time to seek outside help, including that of a man who had been unfairly judged by the community. The question now was, would it be too late to correct the mistake they had all made? The ambulance climbed Poverty Flats with difficulty, its sirens echoing through the narrow alleys and alerting the entire community to the emergency at Bessie's house. Father Amos accompanied the transfer, holding Iris's hand tightly as they watched the paramedics work to stabilize the elderly woman. "Severe pneumonia," confirmed Dr. Ethan, the 42-year-old attending physician at Asheville General Hospital. "She should have sought help at least a week ago. The condition is quite advanced." Iris watched everything with wide eyes of fear and incomprehension. In her 6 years of life, she had never seen so many strangers moving around her grandmother, had never been in an ambulance, had never set foot in a hospital. The world beyond the holler was frightening and confusing. "Does the girl have other relatives?" asked Dr. Ethan to the priest as Bessie was taken to the ICU. "Not that I know of. She's lived only with her grandmother for years." "Then we'll need to contact Child Protective Services. A 6-year-old child cannot be alone, especially if the grandmother's condition worsens." The mention of Child Protective Services made Iris cling even tighter to the priest's arm. She had heard scary stories about children who were taken away from their families by people in uniform. Even if her life with Bessie was difficult, It was all she knew. "Please, Father," she whispered, her tears wetting the sleeve of his cassock. "Don't let them take me. I promise I'll be good." Father Amos's heart broke upon hearing those words. During his 4 decades of pastoral work, he had seen many children in vulnerable situations, but something about the combination of precocious maturity and innocence of Iris touched him deeply. "No one's going to take you, my child. We'll find a solution." But internally, the priest knew that his options were limited. The official system would follow its bureaucratic protocols, and a child without known relatives would automatically be placed in a temporary shelter, unless an alternative arose. It was at that moment that an idea began to form in his mind. Oliver Drummond had demonstrated genuine concern for Iris's well-being. All indications suggested that he was an upright man with resources to help. Perhaps it was time to correct the injustice that the community had committed against him. That night, after leaving Iris sleeping in a chair in the hospital hallway under the care of a sympathetic nurse, Father Amos made a courageous decision. He looked up Oliver's number in the phone book and made a call that would change everything. "Hello," answered Oliver, his voice carrying the weariness of weeks of tension. "Mr. Drummond, this is Father Amos from St. Francis Church in Poverty Flats. Do you have a few minutes to talk?" Oliver almost dropped the phone. What would a priest from the community that had rejected him be doing calling him? Would it be another confrontation? "Father, if it's about that situation..." "It's exactly about that, Mr. Drummond, and I need to apologize to you on behalf of our entire community. I believe we made a serious mistake regarding you." The priest's words caught Oliver completely unprepared. After weeks of being treated as an outcast, a voice of moral authority finally recognized his innocence. "Father, I don't understand. I investigated your situation more deeply, Mr. Drummond. I spoke with people who know your character. I checked your background. I understood that you genuinely wanted to help little Iris, and we judged you wrongly." Oliver felt a mixture of relief and bitterness. The recognition came too late to save his reputation or his marriage, but at least someone knew the truth. "Thank you for telling me that, Father. It means a lot to me. Mr. Drummond, there's an urgent situation that might interest you. Iris's grandmother is hospitalized with severe pneumonia. The girl is alone and may end up being placed in a temporary shelter if no alternative appears." Oliver's heart raced. For weeks, he had worried about Iris's well-being, and now she was exactly in the vulnerable situation he had always feared. "What can I do to help?" "Well, this is delicate. Officially, you're still viewed with suspicion by the community. But if you were willing to meet me at the hospital, perhaps we could discuss some possibilities." An hour later, Oliver was in the parking lot of Asheville General Hospital, nervous as he hadn't felt in years. He had worn simple clothes, jeans and a casual shirt, hoping to seem less intimidating than in his usual executive suits. Father Amos was waiting for him in the lobby, and Oliver was surprised by the man's appearance. He expected to find someone severe and judgmental, but the priest was a black man of medium height, with gentle eyes and a welcoming smile that conveyed genuine peace. "Mr. Drummond, thank you for coming. I know it wasn't easy. Father, if I can help in any way... First, I'd like you to meet Iris personally. She's sleeping in the ICU hallway, waiting for news about her grandmother." They walked through the hospital corridors in silence. Oliver felt a mixture of anxiety and anticipation. After months of observing Iris from a distance, he would finally meet her face to face. When they reached the ICU hallway, they found Iris awake, sitting on a chair that was too big for her, swinging her legs nervously. She wore the same dirty clothes as always, and held a small rag doll that Oliver had never seen before, probably her only real toy. "Iris," said Father Amos gently, "this is Mr. Oliver. Do you remember him?" The girl looked up and examined Oliver with curiosity. After a moment, her expression lit up with recognition. "You're the man who brought food to me," she said simply. "I am," replied Oliver, kneeling to get to her level. "How are you feeling?" "Scared. Grandma is very sick and I don't know what's going to happen to me." The child's raw honesty touched Oliver deeply. At 6 years old, Iris demonstrated a mature understanding of her vulnerability, but still maintained the basic trust of a child who believes that adults can solve problems. "Iris," said Father Amos, "Mr. Oliver would like to help you. How about you two talk for a while?" During the next hour, Oliver had the most important conversation of his life. Iris talked about her routine with Bessie, about how she felt when she received the mysterious gifts, about her dreams of one day learning to read properly and maybe having a warm place to sleep. "Do you have dreams about when you grow up?" Oliver asked. "I want to be a teacher," replied Iris without hesitation, "to teach other children like me to read beautiful books." The simplicity and purity of the girl's dream touched something deep in Oliver's soul. Here was a child who had known only deprivation and neglect, but still dreamed of helping others. "Iris," he said carefully, "if your grandmother can't take care of you for a while, would you like me to help? I have a big house with your own room, lots of books and food always on the table." Iris's eyes widened. "Really? I could live with you? If you want to, and if the father thinks it's a good idea." Iris looked at Father Amos, who nodded encouragingly. Then, in a decision that surprised both adults, she stood up and hugged Oliver. "I want to, yes. You've always been kind to me." But at that moment, a nurse approached with a grave expression on her face. "Father, I need to talk to you about the patient Bessie Santos." The nurse's tone made everyone present realize that difficult news was coming. And whatever Bessie's situation, it would definitely change the future of Iris and everyone around her. The girl's life was about to take a completely new turn, but neither she nor Oliver imagined the obstacles they would still have to face together. "Mrs. Bessie's condition worsened overnight," said the nurse Valerie, an experienced 55-year-old woman who had seen many difficult cases in her 20 years of profession. "She developed respiratory failure and had to be intubated. The next few days will be critical." The words hit Iris like a hammer. Even not fully understanding the medical terms, she understood that her grandmother was in grave danger. Her small hands trembled as she held her ragdoll tighter. "Is she going to die?" asked the girl with an almost inaudible voice. Valerie knelt next to Iris's chair, choosing her words carefully. "We don't know yet, honey. The doctors are doing everything they can to help her. But she's very sick and will need to stay here in the hospital for a long time." Father Amos and Oliver exchanged meaningful glances. Iris's situation had become even more urgent. Regardless of the outcome of Bessie's case, the girl would need a stable and safe home. "Valerie," said the priest, "there are bureaucratic issues that we need to resolve about the girl's custody. Who should we contact?" "Child Protective Services has already been notified automatically. The social worker, Sarah, should arrive in the morning to assess the situation." The mention of Child Protective Services made Iris instinctively cling to Oliver's arm. In recent months, she had developed an instinctive trust in that man who had always been kind to her, even when all the other adults treated him as an enemy. "Mr. Oliver," she whispered, "you promise you won't let them take me away?" The question broke Oliver's heart. "Iris, I'll do everything I can to take care of you, but sometimes adults have complicated rules that we need to follow." That night, Oliver took Iris to his house for the first time. The mansion in the upscale neighborhood of Biltmore Forest represented a completely new world for the girl. When they entered through the front door, she stopped in the entrance hall, watching with astonishment the crystal chandelier, the marble floor, and the paintings on the walls. "It's very big," she commented, her voice echoing in the wide space. "It's bigger than 5 of Grandma's houses." Carol was waiting in the living room, visibly tense. Oliver's decision to bring Iris home had been made without consulting her, creating another source of conflict between the already strained couple. "Iris, this is my wife, Carol." Oliver said carefully. Carol observed the girl with a mixture of curiosity and discomfort. Iris was visibly malnourished. Her clothes were inappropriate for the cold mountain climate, and she carried a characteristic smell of someone who lived in precarious hygienic conditions. "Hello," said Carol politely, but keeping her distance. "Hi, Mrs. Carroll," replied Iris timidly. "Thank you for letting me stay at your house." The girl's natural politeness, despite her difficult circumstances, made a positive first impression on Carol. She had expected to find a troubled or traumatized child, but Iris demonstrated a surprising maturity and education for her age. "I'll show you your room," said Oliver, guiding Iris up the stairs. The guest room had been quickly prepared with clean bedding and some basic toys that Oliver had bought hastily on the way home. When Iris saw the bed, the first real bed that would be hers in years, her eyes filled with tears. "Is it really mine?" she asked, touching the soft comforter delicately. "It's yours," confirmed Oliver, "and tomorrow we'll buy new clothes and everything else you need." That night, after Iris fell asleep, after checking 3 times if the bed wouldn't disappear during the night, Oliver and Carol had the most difficult conversation of their marriage. "Oliver, you brought an unknown child into our house without consulting me," said Carol, her voice controlled but full of frustration. "The situation was an emergency, Carol. The girl had nowhere else to go. And now, what's the plan? Are we going to adopt her? Are we going to raise a child we've known for a few hours?" The question exposed the impulsiveness of Oliver's decision. He had acted moved by emotion and the urgent need to protect Iris, but he hadn't fully thought about the long-term implications. "I don't know," he admitted. "I just know that I couldn't let her be placed in a shelter. Oliver, this girl may have traumas, behavioral problems, special needs that we don't know how to handle. You're making decisions based on guilt and emotion, not on rationality." Carol's words were harsh, but not completely unfair. Oliver recognized that his connection with Iris had roots in his own emotional deficiencies, the inability to have children, the feeling of emptiness that consumed him, the need to give meaning to his life through kindness. "Maybe you're right," he said. "But now she's here and I need to do what's right for her." The next morning, the social worker, Sarah, arrived at Oliver's house at 9 o'clock sharp. She was a competent 38-year-old woman, a social work graduate from the State University who had seen hundreds of cases of children in vulnerable situations. "Mr. Drummond, I need to assess the conditions of this house and its suitability for temporarily caring for Iris," she explained, pulling a clipboard from her folder. The evaluation lasted 2 hours. Sarah examined the room, prepared for Iris, checked the safety of the house, asked questions about Oliver's financial stability and his experience with children. Throughout the process, Iris remained quietly beside Oliver, watching every move of the social worker. "The house is adequate from a physical and financial point of view," said Sarah at the end, "but there are complex legal issues that need to be resolved." "What kind of issues?" asked Oliver. "First, you have no kinship with the child. Second, there have been complaints in the community about suspicious behavior on your part. Third, the grandmother is still alive and technically maintains legal custody." Each point mentioned by Sarah sounded like an insurmountable barrier. Oliver began to understand that his good intentions might not be enough to navigate the complex bureaucratic system that protected children. "What would be the normal procedure in this situation?" he asked. "Normally, Iris would be placed in a temporary shelter until the grandmother's situation is clarified or until relatives are located." "No!" Iris suddenly shouted, surprising all the adults. "I don't want to go to a shelter. I want to stay with Mr. Oliver." The girl's emotional outburst revealed the deep fear that she had been containing. Throughout her life, she had lived with the constant threat of abandonment, and now that she had finally found someone who genuinely cared about her, the possibility of separation was terrifying. Sarah observed Iris's reaction with professional attention. In her experience, traumatized children rarely developed such quick bonds with adults unless they felt genuinely safe. "Iris," she said gently, "do you feel safe here with Mr. Oliver?" "Yes. He's always been good to me. He gave me food when I was hungry, and now he gave me a warm bed. He's not dangerous like Grandma said." The child's words created a moment of tense silence. Sarah was clearly re-evaluating her initial impression of the situation. "Mr. Drummond," she said finally, "there's a possibility of emergency temporary custody, but it would require a rigorous background check and psychological evaluation." "I'm willing to do anything necessary," replied Oliver immediately. "It would also be necessary for your wife to formally agree to the arrangement." All eyes turned to Carol, who had remained silent throughout the conversation. The decision she made in the next few minutes would determine Iris's future and possibly the fate of her own marriage. Carol looked at the little girl, who clung desperately to the possibility of having a family, and something in her heart began to open to a possibility she had never considered. Carol watched Iris for a long moment, seeing a small, vulnerable child who clung to the only stability she had known in months. The girl looked at her with a mixture of hope and terror, clearly understanding that her answer would determine her fate. I need a moment to think," said Carol finally. "Of course," replied Sarah. "It's an important decision that will affect all of you." Carol left the room and went to the balcony, where she usually had coffee in the morning. For 15 years of marriage, she had become accustomed to the predictable and controlled life she had built. Her social routine, her commitments at the club, her occasional trips with friends, all of that would be drastically altered by the presence of a child. But when she looked through the window and saw Iris sitting rigidly on the sofa, trying to be invisible so as not to bother anyone, something in her heart moved. The girl wasn't being dramatic or manipulative. She was simply waiting for the adults to decide her fate, as she had probably learned to do throughout her life. When Carol returned to the room, her decision was made. "I agree with the temporary custody," she said, her voice firm despite the uncertainty she felt. Iris's face lit up with a smile so radiant that it completely transformed her appearance. For the first time since Oliver had met her, she genuinely looked like a happy child. "Thank you, Mrs. Carol! I promise I'll be very good, and I won't be any trouble," said Iris, running to hug Carol's legs. The girl's spontaneous gesture touched Carol in an unexpected way. When she felt the small arms around her legs and Iris's warm face pressed against her dress, she experienced a maternal feeling that she had tried to suppress for years. "Very well," said Sarah, making notes on her clipboard. "I'll start the emergency temporary custody process, but there are conditions that need to be met." The conditions were extensive. Complete background check of both spouses, psychological evaluation, regular visits from social workers, monthly reports on Iris's development, and mandatory participation in a foster parent preparation program. "How long does this whole process take?" asked Oliver. "At least 3 months for the temporary custody to be confirmed. If you decide on permanent adoption, it can take up to a year. During the following weeks, life in the Drummond mansion changed completely. Iris demonstrated an impressive ability to adapt, but also revealed the deep scars of her difficult past. On the first nights, she woke up several times, checking if her bed was still there, and if Oliver and Carol hadn't changed their minds about keeping her. During meals, she ate quickly and kept small pieces of food in her pockets, a habit developed by years of food insecurity. "Iris, you don't need to save food," explained Carol gently. "There will always be more when you want it." "I know," replied the girl, but she secretly continued hiding cookies under her pillow. Iris's physical transformation was remarkable. With proper food, regular baths, and clean clothes, she blossomed like a flower that had finally received proper care. Her cheeks gained color, her hair regained its shine, and she grew visibly in the first weeks. But it was the emotional transformation that most impressed Oliver and Carol. Iris was naturally intelligent and curious, qualities that had been suppressed by the difficulties of her previous life. When she discovered the house's library, she spent hours flipping through books, even without knowing how to read many words. "I want to learn to read everything," she told Carol one afternoon. "I want to know what all these stories say." Carol, who had been a teacher before her marriage, began giving informal lessons to Iris. She discovered that the girl had an exceptional learning ability and a hunger for knowledge that thrilled her. "She's brilliant," Carol commented to Oliver one night. "With the proper education, she can go far in life." Meanwhile, in the hospital, Bessie's condition remained critical but stable. During one of his regular visits, Father Amos brought unexpected news. "Bessie woke up from sedation yesterday," he told Oliver. "She asked about Iris." "What did you tell her?" "The truth, that Iris is well cared for and safe. Initially she was agitated, but when I explained that you were providing the girl with things she could never offer, education, health, stability, she cried." "Cried?" I think for the first time in years, Bessie recognized her own limitations. She said something that surprised me. "Maybe it's better this way. The girl deserves more than I can give." That revelation brought unexpected relief to Oliver. The fear that Bessie would fight for Iris's custody had been a constant worry. Knowing that the woman was beginning to accept the current situation would greatly facilitate the legal process. But not everything was resolved. During a routine visit, Sarah brought troubling news. "There has been a formal complaint to the district attorney questioning the suitability of this placement," she informed them, her expression serious. "What kind of complaint?" asked Carol, feeling a chill in her stomach. "Someone claimed that the situation was not properly investigated and that there are unresolved issues about Mr. Oliver's past behavior." Oliver felt the world crumble again. Just when he thought he had finally overcome the suspicions and misunderstandings, they returned to threaten everything he had built with Iris. "Who made this complaint?" he asked. "I can't reveal the identity, but it came from someone who identified themselves as a concerned member of the community where the child previously lived." Iris, who was playing in the garden but could hear the conversation through the open window, stopped her activities. Even not fully understanding the details, she recognized the tense tone of the adult voices and knew that something bad was being discussed. "Does this mean I'm going to have to leave here?" she asked when she entered the room, her voice small and scared. "Don't worry, Iris," said Oliver, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "We'll figure it all out." But internally, he knew that the battle was far from over. Someone, probably Jolene or another neighbor from the holler, was determined to separate him from Iris, even if it meant destroying the girl's chance to have a better life. "What happens now?" asked Carol. "There will be a formal investigation," explained Sarah. "You will have to attend a hearing where you can defend your position, but until then, Iris can remain here." That night, after Iris fell asleep, Oliver and Carol talked about the real possibility of losing the girl. "I didn't know I would care so much," admitted Carol. "When she arrived, I thought it would just be a temporary situation. But now I can't imagine our house without her." "She changed our lives," agreed Oliver. "She gave me a purpose I didn't know I was looking for." "What if we lose her?" "We won't lose her," said Oliver with determination. "I won't let them harm her future because of prejudice and ignorance." But as he spoke those brave words, Oliver knew that he would face the most important fight of his life. And this time, he wasn't fighting just for his reputation or peace of mind. He was fighting for the right to be a father to the girl who had become the center of his world. In the next room, Iris slept peacefully, hugging the teddy bear that Carol had bought her. In her dreams, she ran through flowery fields where she was never afraid, never hungry, and there were always gentle adults taking care of her. But even in her happiest dreams, there was a shadow of anxiety, the constant feeling that happiness could disappear at any moment. The hearing was scheduled for a rainy Tuesday in August at the Asheville courthouse. Oliver woke up before 5 in the morning, unable to fall back asleep due to the anxiety that consumed him. Today, it would be decided whether he could continue caring for Iris or whether the girl would be forcibly removed from his life. Iris sensed the tension in the air during breakfast. Carol was visibly nervous, stirring incessantly in her cup without drinking the coffee, while Oliver checked and rechecked the documents he would take to the hearing. "Why are you sad?" asked Iris, her childish intuition perfectly capturing the heavy mood that hung over the table. "We're not sad, honey," Carol tried, forcing a smile. "Just worried about some adult things." "It's about me, isn't it?" insisted Iris, her precocious maturity once again surprising the adults. "You think you're going to have to send me away." The silence that followed confirmed the girl's fears. Oliver knelt next to her chair, taking her small hands in his. "Iris, today some people are going to ask questions about our family. We're going to explain to them that you're happy here and that we love you very much, but if by chance—" "I don't want to leave," interrupted Iris, tears beginning to form in her eyes. "Here I have a warm bed, food every day, and you read stories to me. Please don't let them take me." "We're going to fight with all our strength to stay together," promised Oliver, hugging her tight. At the courthouse, the hearing room was cold and intimidating. Oliver and Carol sat on one side, accompanied by Dr. Michael Evans, the attorney that Oliver had hired. On the other side was the district attorney, Dr. Penelope Hayes, a severe 45-year-old woman known for her rigidity in cases involving minors. To everyone's surprise, Jolene was also present, accompanied by a public defender. She would be the main witness against Oliver, representing the concerns of the community about his suitability to care for a child. "Your Honor," began Dr. Evans, addressing the judge, "my client is an upright man who simply tried to help a child in a vulnerable situation. All the allegations against him are based on misunderstandings and prejudices." The DA, Penelope, stood up to present her case. "Your Honor, we have here an irregular situation where a man with no experience with children, and who was the object of justified suspicions from the community, obtained custody of a minor through questionable circumstances." Jolene was called to testify first. Wearing her best clothes and clearly nervous about being in such a formal environment, she repeated her version of events with some dramatic embellishments. "Judge," she said, "I saw that man snooping around Bessie's house for weeks, always hidden, always leaving things. We were scared because rich men don't do that without wanting something in return." "And what kind of something did you suspect?" asked Dr. Evans during cross-examination. "Well, everyone knows that there are people who do bad things with little children," replied Jolene, lowering her voice conspiratorially. "Do you have any concrete evidence of inappropriate behavior?" "Evidence? I didn't need evidence. His behavior was already strange enough." "So you're basing your accusations only on assumptions?" Jolene became visibly uncomfortable. It's a matter of common sense." When it was Oliver's turn to testify, he told his version of events with honesty and contained emotion. He explained how he had witnessed Iris being mistreated on the bus, how he decided to help her anonymously, and how the whole situation had evolved to the present moment. "Mr. Drummond," asked the DA, "don't you think it's problematic that an adult man develops a special interest in an unknown child?" "It wasn't special interest," replied Oliver firmly. "It was human compassion. I saw a child suffering and wanted to help. And why didn't you seek the competent authorities?" "Because I thought I could help more directly and effectively. In retrospect, maybe I should have acted differently, but my intentions were always pure." The hearing took an unexpected turn when Father Amos was called as a witness. The priest, respected in the local community, brought a different perspective to the case. "Your Honor," he said, I personally investigated the allegations against Mr. Oliver. I spoke with people who know his character. I checked his background. I found nothing to suggest inappropriate behavior. And what is your opinion on the child's current situation? Asked the judge. Iris is unrecognizably better. When I first saw her at Mr. Oliver's house, she was a healthy, well-fed, properly dressed child, and more importantly, visibly happy. Contrast that with the precarious situation in which she lived previously. But father, intervened the DA, the issue isn't just the child's material well-being, but her emotional and psychological safety. Exactly my point, replied Father Amos. Iris demonstrates clear signs of a healthy emotional bond with Mr. Oliver and his wife. Separating her from them now would be traumatic. The most emotional moment of the hearing came when Iris herself was called to talk to the judge. The girl entered the room, holding Oliver's hand tightly, her big eyes examining the intimidating environment. The judge, Dr. Michelle Reynolds, an experienced 52-year-old woman and mother of 3, descended from her elevated position and knelt to get to Iris's level. Hello, Iris. My name is Michelle. Can you tell me how you're feeling? Scared, replied Iris honestly. Everyone keeps talking about whether I can stay with Daddy Oliver and Mommy Carol or if I'm going to have to leave. The way Iris referred to Oliver and Carol as Daddy and Mommy had a visible impact on everyone present. It was clear that in the child's mind, they were already her family. Do you like living with them? Asked the judge gently. I like it very much. They give me tasty food, books to learn to read, and they never yell at me. And Daddy Oliver has always protected me, even when Grandma thought he was dangerous. And how do you know he protected you? Because when I was hungry, food always appeared. When I was cold, a blanket appeared. I knew it was him, even before we really met. Iris's innocence and sincerity were clearly touching everyone in the room, including the DA, Penelope, who had begun to question whether she was fighting on the right side. Iris, asked the judge, if you could choose where to live, where would it be? With Daddy Oliver and Mommy Carol, she replied without hesitation. They're my family now. When it was time for closing arguments, Dr. Evans made a passionate plea. Your Honor, we have here a child who has been transformed by love and care. Iris has gone from a situation of extreme neglect to a stable home where she is flourishing. Separating her from this family would be cruel and unnecessary. The DA, Penelope, visibly shaken by Iris's testimony, made her closing arguments with less conviction than she had demonstrated initially. Your Honor, while I recognize that the child appears to be well cared for, we must consider the procedural irregularities and the legitimate concerns of the community. The judge retired to deliberate, leaving everyone in a tense silence. Iris had nestled between Oliver and Carol, and for the first time, the couple realized that they were genuinely united by something greater than themselves, the love for that special girl. 30 minutes later, which seemed like hours, the judge returned with her decision. The future of an entire family depended on the words she was about to pronounce. Judge Michelle Reynolds returned to the room with a serious expression that revealed nothing about her decision. The silence was so deep that you could hear every beat of Oliver and Carol's hearts. Iris was sitting between them, holding both their hands, her eyes fixed on the woman who would determine her fate. After carefully analyzing all the testimonies and evidence presented, began the judge, I must make a decision based on the best interest of the minor Iris. Oliver felt his breathing become shallow. Carol involuntarily squeezed Iris's hand, who remained surprisingly calm for a 6-year-old child facing such uncertainty. It is undeniable that there were irregularities in the initial process, continued the judge. Mr. Oliver acted unconventionally, and the suspicions of the community, although unfounded, were understandable given the context. The judge's words seemed to be heading towards an unfavorable decision, and Dr. Evans mentally prepared for a possible appeal. However, The judge's voice softened slightly. It is also undeniable that the minor Iris demonstrates clear signs of physical and emotional recovery under the care of the Drummond couple. The child has developed healthy emotional bonds and is in an environment that provides stability, education, and love. Iris looked at Oliver with a questioning expression, trying to decipher if the lady's words meant something good or bad for her. Considering the moving testimony of the child herself, who clearly expressed her desire to remain with the family she has chosen, and taking into account the positive assessment of the professionals involved in the case, my decision is as follows. The pause that followed seemed to last an eternity. In the room, everyone held their breath. I grant temporary custody of the minor Iris to the couple Oliver and Carol Drummond, with mandatory monitoring by social services for a period of 6 months, after which the possibility of permanent adoption will be reassessed. The relief that flooded the room was palpable. Iris did not immediately understand all the technical words, but she saw the smile that spread across Oliver and Carol's faces and realized that something very good had happened. "Does this mean I can stay?" she asked, her voice small but hopeful. "It means you can stay," confirmed Oliver, hugging her with tears in his eyes. But the joy was tempered by the reaction of Jolene, who stood up abruptly from her chair. "This isn't right," she protested. "You'll see that I was right about that man." The judge banged her gavel forcefully. "You are disrespecting this court. Bailiff, remove the person from the premises of the courthouse." As Jolene was escorted out, still protesting, Father Amos approached the Drummond family. "God bless you," he said, his voice full of emotion. "Iris deserves all the happiness in the world." On the way back home, Iris asked a question that surprised Oliver and Carol with its depth. "Daddy Oliver, why didn't that lady like me?" Oliver chose his words carefully. "She didn't know you right, Iris. Sometimes people are afraid of what they don't know. But now? She'll leave me alone? Now you're officially our daughter, at least for now. No one can take you from us without a very good reason." The word daughter made Iris's eyes fill with tears of joy. It was the first time someone had called her that with love and genuine intention. The weeks that followed brought a family routine that none of the three had experienced before. Iris began attending a private school near the house, where she quickly stood out for her intelligence and thirst to learn. Her teachers were impressed with her ability to absorb knowledge and her determination to overcome educational gaps. "She reads at the level of a child 2 years older," reported the teacher, Ms. Johnson, during a parent-teacher meeting. "And her essay on my family was one of the most touching I've ever read." Carol, who had involuntarily resumed her pedagogical vocation by helping Iris with her studies, discovered a satisfaction that she had forgotten since she had stopped teaching. "Teaching Iris reminded me why I originally became a teacher," she confessed to Oliver one night. "And how do you feel about that?" he asked. "Like I found my purpose again. She not only filled a void in our lives, she helped me rediscover who I really am." But not everything was completely resolved. One day, during a particularly strong storm, Iris had her first panic attack since arriving at the Drummond's house. The sound of the strong wind and rain hitting the windows made her relive memories of the night she slept on the cold floor of Bessie's shack. "Mommy, Mommy!" she cried out in the middle of the night, running into Oliver and Carol's room. "Is the storm going to knock our house down? Are we going to have to go out in the cold?" Carol hugged her tightly as Oliver turned on the lights to show they were safe. "Our house is strong, Iris. Nothing's going to happen to us." "But what if the power goes out? What if there's no more food? What if you decide I'm too much trouble?" The questions revealed the deep-seated fears Iris still carried. Despite all the security and love she had found, a part of her still expected the happiness to disappear at any moment. "Iris, look at me," Oliver said, gently holding her face. "No matter what happens, storm, power outage, anything, we're going to take care of you. That's what parents do." Forever, she asked, repeating the question she asked regularly when she felt insecure. Forever, they both confirmed in unison. The crisis passed, but it served as a reminder that Iris's healing journey was not yet complete. Dr. Amanda suggested regular family therapy sessions to help everyone process the changes and challenges of the new dynamic. Adoption is a process, not an event, she explained during a session. You're creating a non-traditional family, and that requires special tools. One of the most touching moments of this journey happened when Iris brought home a school project about my family. The teacher had asked each child to create a family tree, and Iris had spent days carefully working on her version. When she showed the project to Oliver and Carol, they were deeply moved. The tree included Jolene as biological grandma, but in the center, with special emphasis, were Daddy Oliver and Mommy Carol as her real parents. The teacher said, "Family isn't just who you're born to," Iris explained. "It's who chooses to love and take care of each other. I chose you, and you chose me." Around this time, unexpected news arrived about Jolene. The elderly woman had moved into a small house in downtown Asheville, financed by a government program for vulnerable seniors. More surprisingly, she had started volunteering at a community daycare center. "She wants to meet with you," Father Amos informed them during one of his visits. "She said she has something important to talk about." The meeting was set for a Saturday afternoon at Jolene's small apartment. When they arrived, Oliver and Carol were surprised by the woman's transformation. She was cleaner, better dressed, and there was a serenity in her eyes that hadn't existed before. "Thank you for coming," Jolene said, serving coffee in simple but clean cups. "I wanted to talk about Iris." "How are you feeling?" Iris asked, still maintaining a certain distance from her grandmother. "Better, dear. Much better. And you, are you happy?" "Very happy," Iris replied without hesitation. "I have my own bed, lots of books, and Daddy and Mommy help me with my homework every day." Jolene smiled, a genuine smile that Oliver had never seen before. "That's why I wanted to talk to you. I want to officially relinquish any legal rights to Iris." "Jolene, are you sure?" Oliver asked. "This would make the adoption irreversible." "I'm absolutely sure. During these months working at the daycare, I've seen many neglected children. I've seen what it's like when a child doesn't have love, care, opportunities. Iris has all that with you." The woman turned to her granddaughter with teary eyes. "Iris, do you forgive me for not being a better grandmother?" The question surprised the girl, who needed to think before answering. "Grandma, you did what you could with what you knew. Now I have a new family, but that doesn't mean I don't like you anymore." Iris's emotional maturity once again left all the adults in awe. At 6 years old, she had learned to separate behavior from person, to forgive without forgetting, and to value the present without denying the past. "There's one more thing," Jolene said, taking a yellowed envelope from a drawer. "These are photos of Iris's parents. I thought she should have them." The photographs showed a young couple smiling, embracing. The man had the same expressive eyes as Iris, and the woman had her sweet smile. In the last photo, the three of them were together, parents and baby, in a moment of family happiness. "They loved you very much," Jolene told Iris. "Even though they couldn't stay with you, they wanted you to be happy." Iris held the photos carefully, studying the faces of people she barely remembered, but had carried in her heart throughout her life. "Can I keep them?" she asked. "They're yours," Jolene replied. "Just like your new family is yours. You deserve to have both parts of your story." When they left Jolene's apartment that afternoon, Oliver, Carol, and Iris knew they had closed an important circle. The past had been honored and accepted. The present was secure, and the future seemed bright with endless possibilities. But there was still one last surprise waiting for them, a revelation that would forever change the way they understood their journey together. The final revelation came in a completely unexpected way. during a quiet Sunday afternoon when Iris was organizing her old photographs into a new album that Carol had bought for her. The girl had become meticulous about her belongings, carefully organizing every memory of her life before and after the adoption. "Mommy Carol," Iris called from the living room table, "can you help me glue this photo into the album? My hands are too small." Carol approached and picked up the photograph Iris was holding, one of the images of her biological parents that Jolene had recently given her. When she looked more closely at the photo, her heart almost stopped. "Oliver," she called in a strange voice, "can you come here, please?" Oliver was in the office reviewing some company documents when he heard the urgent tone in his wife's voice. When he approached and saw the expression on Carol's face, he immediately knew that something important had happened. "What is it?" he asked. Carol handed him the photograph without saying a word. Oliver looked at the image and felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. The man in the photo was his younger brother Gabriel, whom he had lost in a car accident 15 years ago. "It's not possible," he murmured, his hands shaking as he held the photo. "Iris," Carol said carefully, "do you remember your parents' names?" "Grandma always said my father's name was Gabriel and my mother was Lucia," Iris replied, not understanding the emotional turmoil that had settled between the adults. Oliver sat down heavily on the sofa, the photograph still in his hands. Gabriel had moved to upstate Asheville at 18, following a girlfriend, and contact between the brothers had become sporadic. The last time they had spoken was by telephone, a few months before the accident that took his life. "Gabriel never told me he had a daughter," Oliver whispered, looking at Iris with a completely new understanding. "Maybe he didn't know," Carol suggested. "Or maybe he hadn't had time to tell you." The revelation instantly transformed the dynamics of everything they had experienced. Iris was not just a child that Oliver had chosen to help out of compassion. She was his biological niece, the daughter of the brother he had tragically lost. "Does that mean," Iris began, slowly processing the implications, "that you're my real uncle?" "It seems so," Oliver replied, his voice choked with emotion. "Your father was my younger brother." During the following hours, Oliver told Iris everything he remembered about Gabriel. How creative and dreamy he was, how he loved to draw and invent stories, how he had left home young in search of adventures. "Did he like to draw?" Iris asked excitedly. "I like to draw too." "He liked it very much. And you got that from him," Oliver said, seeing for the first time family similarities that he had ignored before. Carol watched the conversation with a mixture of joy and concern. On the one hand, the discovery explained the instant connection that Oliver had felt with Iris. On the other, it raised complex legal and emotional questions about the adoption. "Oliver," she said later when Iris had gone to play in the garden, "does this change anything about the adoption?" "It changes everything, and it changes nothing," he replied thoughtfully. "It changes because now I understand why I felt so connected to her from the first moment. It doesn't change because I already loved her as a daughter, regardless of biology." "And her? How do you think she'll process this information?" "I think that for Iris, this only adds more love to the equation. She doesn't lose anything. She only gains another layer of belonging." In the following days, the revelation brought a new depth to the family relationship. Oliver shared with Iris all the memories he had of Gabriel, showing old photographs and telling stories about the childhood they had spent together. "Was he like me when he was little?" Iris asked, studying a photo of Gabriel at 8 years old. "Very similar. Same curious eyes, same stubbornness," Oliver laughed, "and the same talent for drawing." Iris was silent for a moment, processing the information. "Uncle Oliver, Daddy, can I call you both?" The question touched Oliver's heart deeply. "You can call me whatever you want, Iris. I'm your uncle and your father. Both things." "And that means you wanted me even before you met me, because I was already part of the family." It means that destiny found a way to bring us together, Carol replied, hugging the girl. Whether it's destiny, luck, or divine intervention, you always belonged with us. The discovery also brought a new perspective on Jolene's behavior. When Father Amos visited Jolene to tell her about the revelation, she finally explained why she had been so resistant to accepting help. I knew that Gabriel had family in Asheville, she confessed. When Lucia left Iris with me, I was afraid that if her father's family found out about her, they would want to take her away from me. So you knew that Oliver could be related to Iris? I suspected it. The last name was the same, and that man looked a lot like Gabriel when he was younger. But I was scared and angry, so I pretended I didn't see it. Jolene's final explanation completed the puzzle that had confused everyone for so long. Her hostility was not just paranoia. It was the fear of losing the only family she had left. When Oliver visited Jolene to talk about the discovery, he found a woman completely transformed by the revelation. Now I understand why you were interested in Iris, she said. You weren't a stranger trying to do harm. You were her uncle trying to take care of family. Jolene, you did what you thought was best at the time. No one can blame you for protecting Iris. But I can blame myself for almost preventing her from finding where she really belonged, the elderly woman replied, tears running down her face. 2 weeks after the revelation, the family received a call from the registry office informing them that all the adoption documents were ready for signing. The irony of discovering the biological kinship exactly when the family was becoming legally official did not go unnoticed by any of them. It's as if the universe is giving us its approval, Carol commented as they headed to the registry office. At the simple but moving ceremony, Iris signed her first official document with her new name, Iris Drummond. When the officer asked if she understood the meaning of what was happening, she replied with the simple wisdom that had become her trademark. It means that now everyone will officially know what I already knew in my heart, that this is my real family. After the ceremony, as they walked through downtown Asheville under the soft afternoon sun, Iris made an observation that perfectly summarized the entire journey they had traveled together. You know, Daddy, if that bad man on the bus hadn't pushed me that day, maybe we never would have met. That's true, Oliver agreed, reflecting on how the most traumatic moment of Iris's life had been, paradoxically, the beginning of her salvation. So sometimes bad things happen so that good things can happen later? She asked, once again demonstrating her ability to find meaning in difficult experiences. Sometimes yes, Carol replied. But the most important thing is that regardless of how it started, our story ended in the best way possible. And that night, as Iris slept peacefully in her bed, the first bed that truly belonged to her, Oliver and Carol reflected on the extraordinary journey that had transformed them from a childless couple into a complete and happy family. But there was still one last surprise waiting for them, a discovery that would put the perfect finishing touch on a story that had begun with suffering and culminated in unconditional love. 3 months after the adoption became official, the Drummond family's life had found a harmonious rhythm that seemed to have always existed. Iris was thriving at school, where she had become one of the students most loved by teachers and peers. Her grades were excellent, especially in writing and drawing, talents that she had clearly inherited from her biological father. Her evolution is extraordinary, commented the school principal, Professor Ruth, during a parent meeting. In just 1 year, she has not only overcome educational gaps, but has stood out as one of the most empathetic and mature children I have ever known. Oliver and Carol had become accustomed to receiving constant praise about Iris, but they never failed to be proud when they heard about her progress. The girl had become the joyful center of their lives, transforming not only their routine, but their perspectives on everything. You know, Carol said to Oliver one night as they watched Iris drawing at the kitchen table, sometimes I'm afraid of waking up and discovering that all of this was a dream. "I understand the feeling," he replied. "But look at her, look at us. This is real, and it's ours." Iris, who had developed a keen ear for adult conversations, a skill acquired during the difficult years with Jolene, looked up from her drawing. "Are you talking about me again?" she asked with a smile. "Naughty. We're always talking about you," Carol laughed. "It's because you're our favorite person in the whole world." "I love you too," Iris replied, returning to her drawing. "I'm making a portrait of our family to hang on the wall." The drawing showed 3 figures holding hands in front of a large house, with the sun shining and birds flying in the sky. It was an image of pure happiness that perfectly reflected how Iris saw her new life. But it was during this time of tranquility that a letter arrived that would once again change her understanding of the past. The envelope arrived on a Saturday morning, addressed to Oliver, with a return address from a law office in Asheville that he didn't recognize. "Dr. Oliver Drummond," the formal letter read, "we represent the interests of the estate of Gabriel Henrique Drummond. We recently learned through county records that you adopted a minor named Iris, identified as the daughter of our deceased client. We request an urgent meeting to discuss matters pertaining to the inheritance." Oliver read the letter twice before fully comprehending its implications. Gabriel had left an inheritance, and Iris, as his biological daughter, had rights to it. "What does this mean?" Carol asked when he showed her the letter. "It means Gabriel was more prosperous than I imagined, and that Iris may have inherited something from him." The meeting was set for the following Tuesday at the office of attorney Dr. Charles Mendoza, an elegant 60-year-old man who had represented Gabriel in the last years of his life. "Mr. Drummond," Dr. Mendoza said, "your brother Gabriel was my client for 5 years before his passing. He had built a fairly successful graphic design business in Asheville." "I had no idea," Oliver admitted. "We lost contact in recent years. Gabriel contacted me when he learned he was going to be a father. He wanted to ensure that if something happened to him, his daughter would be financially protected." Dr. Mendoza opened a thick folder and removed several documents. He left a specific will, allocating all of his assets to his daughter Iris. At the time of his passing, the estate included the company, a house in Asheville, and investments that, with accumulated income, today total approximately $800,000. The amount left Oliver and Carol speechless. Iris had spent years living in extreme poverty while entitled to a considerable estate. "Why was this never executed?" Carol asked. "Because we were never able to locate the child. Gabriel had told me that she was under the care of her maternal grandmother, but we didn't have precise information about location or documentation. It was only through the adoption record that we discovered where she was." "And now?" Oliver asked. "Now Iris is officially the heir to a substantial estate. As her adoptive parents, you will be the legal administrators until she reaches adulthood." The revelation brought a mixture of conflicting emotions. On the one hand, it meant total financial security for Iris's future. On the other, it raised questions about how a 7-year-old child would process the information that she was, technically, wealthy. "How should we tell her this?" Carol asked during the drive back home. "Carefully," Oliver replied. "She's been through enough changes. Let's explain it gradually." That afternoon, they sat down with Iris in the living room and tried to explain the situation in terms she could understand. "Remember that your daddy Gabriel was my brother," Oliver began. "I remember," Iris replied, paying full attention. "Well, we found out that he left some things for you. Money saved, a house, things he wanted to be yours when you grew up." Iris was silent for a moment, processing the information. "Does that mean I'm rich?" "It means you have resources that your father wanted you to have," Carol explained. "But that doesn't change anything about our family or our life together." "Can I buy toys?" Iris asked, demonstrating her 7-year-old priorities. "You already have all the toys you want," Oliver laughed. "This money is for important things when you're older. College, a house of your own. fulfilling your dreams. Oh, my dreams are to stay with you and be a teacher, Iris said simply. I don't need money for that. Iris's natural wisdom once again impressed her parents. Even discovering that she had a considerable inheritance, her priorities remained centered on love, family, and purpose. A few weeks later, they visited the house in Asheville that Gabriel had left for Iris. It was a charming property in the historic district, with 3 bedrooms and a studio where Gabriel had worked on his design projects. Was this my real father's house? Iris asked, exploring the rooms with curiosity. It was, Oliver confirmed, and now it's yours. In the studio, they found dozens of drawings and projects that Gabriel had created. Iris was fascinated to see her father's artistic work, instinctively recognizing a talent that she herself possessed. "He drew like me," she exclaimed, flipping through a sketchbook. "You inherited his talent," Carol said. "And who knows, maybe one day you'll use this studio for your own projects." But the most exciting discovery was kept in a locked drawer in the office. Dr. Mendoza had found the key among Gabriel's personal belongings, and when they opened it, they found letters addressed to "My dear daughter." Gabriel had written a series of letters to Iris, one for each year of her life up to 18. Even not knowing if he would live to deliver them personally, he had wanted to leave words of love and guidance for his daughter. "Can I read it?" Iris asked, holding the letter marked, "For Iris at 7 years old." "It's yours," Oliver said, moved by his brother's foresight and love. The letter was simple but deeply touching. "My dear Iris, if you're reading this, it means I couldn't be there for your 7th birthday. I hope you have found people who love you as you deserve to be loved. You are my greatest joy, and even if we can't be together, I carry you in my heart always. Be brave, be kind, and never forget that you are loved infinitely. Daddy Gabriel." Iris read the letter in silence, tears running down her cheeks. When she finished, she looked at Oliver and Carol with an expression of deep gratitude. "Now, I have 2 fathers who love me," she said. "One who is in heaven, and you 2 who are here with me." At that moment, standing in the studio that had belonged to Gabriel, surrounded by his artistic creations and holding the letters of love that he had left for his daughter, they all understood that they had discovered the final piece of the puzzle. Gabriel had loved Iris deeply and had done everything possible to ensure her future. When he could not be present physically, fate had found a way to deliver his daughter into the care of his own brother. "It's like he knew," Oliver murmured, looking at a photograph of Gabriel smiling. "Like he knew I would take care of her." "Maybe he did," Carol replied. "Maybe love always finds a way." That afternoon, as Iris explored her inheritance and discovered more about the father she had lost but had never stopped loving, a feeling of completeness took over the Drummond family. All the pieces fit perfectly, creating a story of love that transcended tragedy, overcame misunderstandings, and transformed suffering into lasting joy. 2 years later, on a sunny December morning that marked exactly 3 years since Oliver had first seen Iris being pushed off the bus, the Drummond family was preparing for a special celebration. Iris, now 9 years old, had become a confident and radiant girl who little resembled the frightened and hungry child she had once been. "Daddy, do you remember the day we met?" Iris asked as she got ready for the party they had organized. It was a question she asked regularly, as if she wanted to confirm that her memories were real and that her transformation had really happened. "How could I forget?" Oliver replied, adjusting the tie that she had insisted on choosing for him. "It was the most important day of my life." Today's party was a family celebration, but also a symbolic milestone. 3 years ago, a girl had lost everything she knew. Today, she was celebrating not only her new life, but also the fruits of her determination and the love she had found. Iris had become an exemplary student, consistently among the best in her class. More importantly, she had developed a generous and empathetic personality that made her beloved by everyone around her. Her teachers often commented on her unique ability to help other children who were going through difficulties. She has a special sensitivity to perceive when someone is suffering, Teacher Melanie had recently said. It's as if her own experiences had given her a wisdom about pain and healing that she uses to help others. At the party, held in the garden of the house that was now truly her home, were all the people who had been part of her journey. Father Amos had come from Poverty Flats, bringing news that he had founded a support program for vulnerable children inspired by Iris's story. "Your story changed our community," he told Iris. "Now we pay more attention to children who need help, and we have several cases of families who have opened up to help." Jolene was also present, transformed into a dignified lady who had found purpose in her volunteer work with underprivileged children. Her relationship with Iris had evolved into something beautiful and healthy. She was the grandmother who visited occasionally and who always brought interesting stories about her work at the daycare. "Iris," Jolene said during the party, "do you know that you helped me as much as I once tried to help you?" "How so, Grandma?" "Taking care of you taught me that I had more love to give than I thought. Now I use that love to help other children at the daycare." Detective Robert Silver was there with his family, as was social worker Sarah, who had become a close friend. Even Judge Michelle Reynolds had accepted the invitation, curious to see how the girl who had impressed her at the hearing was developing. "Iris has become one of the most successful cases I've ever followed," the judge commented to Oliver. "Not only because of the stability she found, but because of the way she herself became a source of light for others." But the biggest surprise of the party was the unexpected arrival of Bart, the bus driver who had pushed Iris 3 years ago. He had found out about the party through Father Amos and asked to come and apologize personally. "Girl," he said, visibly nervous and repentant, "I came here to ask you for forgiveness for what I did that day. I have no excuse for my behavior." Iris looked at the man who had been responsible for the most traumatic moment of her life. Instead of anger or fear, her eyes reflected a mature compassion that surprised everyone present. "Mr. Bart," she said calmly, "if you hadn't pushed me that day, maybe I would never have found my real family. Sometimes bad things happen so that good things can happen later." Iris's response left Bart in tears. He had carried the guilt of that moment for 3 years, and the girl's ability to forgive touched him deeply. "You're a special child," he said. "I hope you have a wonderful life." During the party, Iris gave a special presentation for all the guests. She had written an essay about her journey that she wanted to share. With the confidence of a loved and secure child, she positioned herself in the center of the garden and began to read My Love Story by Iris Drummond. 3 years ago, I was a very sad girl who didn't know what it was like to have a real family. I thought family was just the people you were born with, but I discovered that family is much more than that. Family are the people who choose to love you, even when you come from difficult places. Family are the people who give you food when you are hungry, who hug you when you are scared, and who stay by your side even when other people don't understand. I was lucky because I found not one, but several families. My daddy Gabriel, who is in heaven but who loved me even before I was born. My grandma Jolene, who did the best she could with what she knew. And my parents of the heart, Oliver and Carol, who showed me that love has no limit. I learned that sometimes life is hard, but there is always hope. I learned that good people exist everywhere, waiting to help. And I learned that it doesn't matter how your story starts. What matters is how it continues and how it ends. My story started sad, but it's having the best possible ending. And I want to use everything I've learned to help other children who are going through what I went through. Because everyone deserves to have a family that loves them, and everyone deserves to have hope. Thank you to everyone who is part of my love story." When Iris finished reading, there wasn't a dry eye in the garden. Her ability to transform traumatic experiences into wisdom and compassion had deeply touched everyone present. Later, when the guests had left and the family was alone, Iris asked a question that she had been saving throughout the party. "Daddy, Mommy," she said, "can I do something special with the money that my daddy Gabriel left me?" "What would you like to do?" Carol asked. "I want to help other children like me, create a place where boys and girls who don't have a family can stay until they find parents like you." Iris's proposal left Oliver and Carol moved and proud. At 9 years old, she was thinking of using her inheritance to multiply the help she had received. "It's a wonderful idea," Oliver said. "But are you sure? That money is yours, for your future." "My future is already guaranteed," Iris replied wisely. "I have you, I have a house, I have love. Other children need that too." That night, as Iris slept peacefully in her bed, the same bed that had been her first symbol of security and belonging, Oliver and Carol talked about the extraordinary journey that had transformed them from a couple without children into a complete family. "Do you think Gabriel planned all of this?" Carol asked, looking at the stars through the window. "I think love always finds a way," Oliver replied. "Gabriel loved Iris enough to make sure she was protected. We loved her enough to fight for her, and she loves us enough to want to share this happiness with other children." And Jolene, even she found her place in the story. Everyone found their place. Even Bart found a way to redeem himself today. Carol smiled, thinking about the capacity for forgiveness that Iris had demonstrated. "Our daughter is special, isn't she?" "She is," Oliver agreed, "but not because she went through hardships. She's special because she transformed those hardships into compassion." 3 months later, the Gabriel and Iris Foundation for Vulnerable Children was officially established. Funded by the inheritance that Gabriel had left and administered by a partnership between the Drummond family and local child protective organizations. The first project would be the construction of a temporary shelter for children waiting for adoption. "We're going to make sure that every child has the chance that I had," Iris said during the Foundation's launch ceremony. "We're going to show that every child deserves love and a family." And so, a story that had begun with suffering, injustice, and abandonment was transformed into a continuous source of hope and transformation for dozens of other children. Iris had gone from victim to survivor, from survivor to thriving, and from thriving to agent of change. That night, as on every night of the past 3 years, Oliver and Carol went into Iris's room to say goodnight. She was awake, as she sometimes was when she had important thoughts. "What are you thinking about, my love?" Carol asked. "I'm thinking that maybe there are no coincidences," Iris said. "Maybe all the difficult things that happened to me happened for a reason, so that I could find you, and so that together we could help other children." "And what do you think of that possibility?" Oliver asked. "I think it makes everything worthwhile," she replied, smiling. "I think that sometimes life tests us to see if we are strong enough to help others when our turn comes." As Iris finally fell asleep, clutching the teddy bear that had become her constant companion, Oliver and Carol left the room knowing that they had witnessed something truly extraordinary. A girl had transformed not only her own life, but the lives of everyone around her, proving that love, when combined with determination and hope, can truly move mountains. The story of Iris Drummond had begun on the cold streets of Asheville, on a rainy night when a child was pushed off a bus for not having money for the fare. It had become a celebration of the transformative power of unconditional love, the importance of not giving up on people, and the human capacity to find purpose even in the most painful experiences. And while the family slept peacefully in the house that had become a symbol of hope and new beginnings, other children in similar situations slept with a little more hope, knowing that somewhere a girl like them had found her forever family. and that she now dedicated her life to ensuring that they could also find theirs.